This talk is supported by Small PDF, the successful Swiss scale-up making PDF easy for over 1 billion people around the world since 2013. You may remember them from a previous podcast we hosted with their CEO, Dennis Just. Their mission is to make PDFs and life easy for people across the world, a mission made possible with their 90-plus amazing employees across Zurich, Belgrade, and Barcelona. If you want to join this fast-growing Swiss scale-up, visit smallpdf.com/Swisspreneur and apply.
In the year we listed, we had an EBITDA of minus 2.4 million, so we were burning cash. And last year we had an EBITDA of plus 2.5 million, so we basically turned the business around.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Sylvan.
Jan, a very welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're the CEO at ASMALLWORLD, the world's leading travel and lifestyle community. Before we talk about your business, I actually want to focus on your studies. You did your studies in business administration, both here in Switzerland at the University of St. Gallen, but then also did an exchange in Singapore. What led you to the decision to study abroad in Singapore?
Yeah, that's right. I studied in St. Gallen. I was part of the strategy and international management class in my master's. And they offered this dual degree with the Nanyang business school in the western part of Singapore, just outside in the middle of nowhere. It just seemed like a really cool thing to do, right? So instead of doing 1.5 years, you'd spend 1 year in Switzerland, 1 year in Singapore. And it was at the end of my studies. And I felt, well, why not take some time off from the work I did on the side and do something cool and spend the year in Singapore.
What did you take away from that year? How did it shape you or change you?
It actually had a more profound sort of effect on me than I would have thought before I went, because it was really the first time where I lived abroad. So until that point, I lived in Zurich and in St. Gallen for a bit.
Right.
But I've been traveling, of course. I went on vacation to other locations. But it was really the first time when I spent a longer period of time somewhere else, and I was part of a university class. I had to make new friends. I had to make international friends. The studies were completely in English, although they were in St. Gallen as well. But it felt kind of like I don't know, it didn't feel full on, right?
Right.
To use that
I feel you.
term, yeah. So it's to be immersed in a very different culture, or in a melting pot of cultures that Singapore is. And just going to the shops, and the products look different, and it was just, it shaped me in a bit where I started to question the way we do things in Switzerland for certain things. So it was the first time I was like, okay, well, maybe there's another way to do things. And
Nice.
I think that sort of realization that there is not just one way to do it right is actually, it really changes your whole outlook. You question the way you do your own things, to question like society does things, and so it had a really profound effect to answer your question.
Yeah, it's easy, right, to forget to question the status quo in our own bubble here in Switzerland, if that's your only...
Yes, I mean, Switzerland is a bubble, but I feel like it, no matter where you're from, right? I feel the first time you really immerse yourself in another culture, you see how things can get done differently, whether you're from Switzerland or you're from Italy or whichever country. It just shapes your way of thinking, this is the right way to do it, and to, there are different ways to do that, and you can do it differently. And once you have that realization, I mean, for me, it felt very freeing in a way, and it opened up a lot more possibilities. And since then, I think I've been a lot less certain about it has to be a certain way, and a lot more open to different ways. And I kept that with me until today.
Great. And then the openness is also something that you then saw when you finished your studies, right? So I was wondering, what were your professional aspirations and goals after you've finished your studies?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually had my job locked in before I went to Singapore.
Okay.
It was because I knew that I wanted to go into management consulting, was just something I wanted to do. And also, I had a girlfriend in Switzerland at the time, and she was like, "Well, you're going to Singapore. Are you ever going to come back or not?" And so I really felt that why not do the interviews before I leave? And so I interviewed with actually 2 management consultancies, Bain and Monitor at the time. They're no longer around. And I got the job with Bain, and so I signed, and I had that cozy situation where the last year of studies for me was just a bit to relax and like enjoy it while I already knew that I had a job for when I come back to Switzerland. But then the funny thing is, and when you say like how did it shape me, that stay in Singapore, when I came back to Switzerland, I really felt I didn't want to be here. So that not in the sense that I didn't like it, but because of the experience I had in Singapore and like the effect it had on me, I really felt that it's now time to go and explore other places. I mean, now is the time to do it. And I remember having a conversation, I think, into my second week at Bain in Switzerland, saying like, I made a mistake. I should actually not be here. I want to be somewhere else. And they looked at me like, what's going on with this guy?
Yeah, of course.
But what was really cool, and that's why one thing leads to another, they said, okay, well, we'll see what we can do. And a few weeks later, they actually came up with an opportunity for me to transfer to Bain's New York office, where I actually spent a bit more than like 9 months as a transfer. And so one thing led to another in that sense. So Singapore really opened up the world to me and wanting to live in other places and experience other cultures.
Yeah, that would have been a tough moment, right? You wanting to explore the world, but then being forced to stay in Switzerland, not being able to do so.
Yeah, it's so funny because I really wanted that job. And so I came back and I was so ungrateful almost for having it. And I looked in the mirror and said, well, what's wrong with you? But that feeling of wanting to go and explore was so strong. And luckily it turned out well. I mean, I stayed for another 10 years to go fast forward. So it worked out, but actually with more stages abroad. But in that sense, the Singapore experience really opened up the world for me and that desire to travel and experience other cultures.
And you mentioned the 10 years. So also, of course, you want to know, how did that help you to then become an entrepreneur yourself? Because management consulting, you see a lot of different companies, organizations, and challenges. Did that help you and shape you to become an entrepreneur yourself later down the road?
Yes and no. I mean, there's in the sense that Bain or any management consultancy or any of the big ones, what they teach you a really sound general manager toolkit. So, I mean, I've been working with industrial goods companies, financial services companies. I've been working in private equity. During my time in South Africa, I've been working with gold mines and platinum mines. And so really a broad spectrum of industries. And what that did, and also capabilities. You do cost cutting, you do organizational work. You, I mean, at some point, for the mines, we were doing shift schedules to be most productive and then use the asset. So you really do a lot of different kind of work, and it's like an apprenticeship of a very high level, right? So because you learn from the senior guys, you learn from the companies you work with. So in that sense, it prepares you for, it creates your management toolkit that you need to run a company. On the other hand, what it doesn't necessarily do is it doesn't really prepare you for the stress and so the context of a small startup, because in management consulting, because it's an expensive service, you usually only work with very big companies. So you're used to like the UBSs, the Novartises of the world, really big companies and political companies and specialized companies. And the startup game is very different. You do a lot of different things with very few people.
Right.
And so that's a very different world. So in that sense, it prepares you because you learn skills, but it prepares you for a large company setup and not for a small company setup. I'd say that's the only thing that it doesn't do.
Right. And where did then your entrepreneurial drive come from? Was that always in you, or do you have any role models in your family that then led your path towards entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm not an entrepreneur as such, and I still wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur because I've never founded my own company. With ASMALLWORLD, I joined a company that was already there, with small size, so you can call it a startup in that sense. But I was always more the consultant in the sense that I would look at something, usually a business that kind of works, right? So, I mean, it has to work somehow. Otherwise, usually they couldn't pay our fees. But it could do better. Right. And so I was always very good at like looking at a business and say, okay, look, if they change these few things, it will go a lot better. So I think I'm a bit more of a problem solver, like if you simplify personality types, and not a typical entrepreneur, because I always found the risk of, you know, building something, investing, putting it all in one basket, actually a bit scary. And it also depends on what your alternative is. And when your alternative is that you have a job at one of the big management consultancies and make good money there, why would you go and take that risk unless you really, really want to? Right. But in my case, with the Small World, it was I said 10 years into Bain, when the opportunity came up, and first I turned it down as for the reasons I just mentioned. I actually close to partner, so I really want to do this. I have invested so much time here, and then I thought about it again, and I thought, okay, Small World. I know the company as a customer, like I knew it from back in the day. I really liked it. I felt they didn't do such a good job with it at the time. Like it was sort of, I felt like it was a bit in steady decline. And I think that was where my problem solver side came in again. And I felt like, okay, I can do something with this and do this better. And so I kind of then with that mindset became an entrepreneur, if you want to call it that, if you define it as taking over a smaller company and wanting to grow it and make it successful.
That's very interesting, right? You saw the issues or the problems yourself as a user and thought, well, I can do better than this.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, when you're management consulting for 10 years, it's that, you've probably heard that from other people, you're always a bit on the sidelines. And yes, you team with your clients, and yes, you want them to succeed, but ultimately, you're not calling the shots. There are meetings where you're not even invited to because it's company only. So you're always a bit. You like the coach on the football field, like shouting in from the side. Obviously, it's an important role, sure, but you never score the goals or make that crucial pass. And I felt that was something that was missing in my career so far. And I also felt that I wouldn't do it with a company where I felt the product is not something I can relate to. So maybe if somebody would have come to me and it would have been, a manufacturer of fine tools or something like that, where I say, okay, I couldn't really get myself to do that. But with Small World, I felt, look, it's also an industry that I like. It's social media, it's travel, and I felt, yeah, it's probably one of those opportunities that doesn't come too often, and I have to take it. Otherwise, I would always say, well, what if, right? And you don't want to live with the what ifs. They're annoying and they're not going to go away. And but I in that sense, I also hedged myself that I say, look, can I come back if this doesn't work out, or if I feel like coming back, and I had an open door to come back. By now I've been probably gone a bit too long, but yeah. So that's how I played it, and I still enjoy what I'm doing there.
And I also want to talk a bit about the history of A Small World, because A Small World was created in 2004. Then in 2013 it was actually acquired by Patrick Lyotard-Vogt. So, and you then joined in 2016. So can you take us a bit back to the early days? What was A Small World doing back then? And how did the ownership change and structure change over that time?
Yeah, it's interesting. You have to think back to 2004, as you said, which is hard to do these days because the world looked very different. But I mean, think of a dial-up modem at home that makes a noise before you have an internet connection, and you remember that, yes, right? So it was those days where the internet was new, and also social media was new. It was MySpace was around, right? It was sort of one of the big ones at the time. But so social media was something new to connect with others, like over the internet, exchange messages, be in a chat board and all that. And that's what A Small World did back then. I mean, it was founded by a Swedish couple, came from a wealthy family, and they had some interesting friends, and they basically created it as a hobby, and by invitation only. So they basically had their friends on it, And then everybody was curious, what is this? And like, can I join it? And then they invited more and more people. And then the word spread and like, oh, this is cool. And also it was a bit like a fancy nightclub. It had like the right people in it. Yeah. And then it took on a life of its own and it became very, very popular and grew and grew. And then, yes, there were actually 2 ownership changes over the years. And I think they haven't necessarily been successful at transferring, or it suffered one of those startup issues where it's a great product, but it couldn't really monetize itself. Mm-hmm. And they tried it with advertising, but they were too small. Then also the other thing that happened is Facebook came up at that time and basically took the social media space by storm because it was just better and more prominent and all that. And that all then pushed sort of the popularity of A Small World down a little bit. And also the fact that then, the owners at that time weren't entirely sure what to do with it. Yeah. So they didn't invest, right? That's what you do. If you're not sure what to do, you don't put more money in it. And the platform suffered, right? And by the time I actually joined, we had one of my first decisions was to rebuild the apps and improve the tech and so on. And I think I was telling you jokingly, at some point, I still have from my first few months items on my to-do list for the tech changes. It's just like it's a never-ending story, right? And what you want to make better and so on. But that's the story of A Small World and how we got to when I started.
And what role? I mean, many people know him or have read about him. Patrick Lyotard-Vogt. What was his role back then? I mean, he basically also helped to purchase the company, right?
Yeah, no, he actually bought it. Patrick is a great guy. He's a true entrepreneur, I have to say. So not like me, who was just like maneuvered himself into this situation. But he's an entrepreneur. He sees opportunities. He goes after them, and he saw that one with A Small World. I think it's also was driven by his own love for the network. Mm-hmm. But then also he had. He did Ausgang.ch, one of the internet platforms for the nightlife in Switzerland. And he was very successful with that and sold it. And I think he thought that he could take this over, make a few changes, and then sell it again. I think that was the original plan. And then, that sort of didn't materialize right away. And then I think he was in that position of what are we going to do with this now? Sure. And out of this sort of discussion and that spirit, he then felt like, okay, we have to then build something for the longer term and do something with it. And the conversations with me started.
Great. And, if you look at the market, the travel market is quite saturated, right? Yeah. So what does A Small World do differently to really differentiate and sort of bring and build a completely new experience that we haven't seen before? Right. So how do you survive in that saturated market?
Yeah, I mean, we're a bit of a strange combination because we don't have one product, right? It's not even go out there and I sell computers or I sell chairs or whatever. So we're a social network in our core, and so we connect people. Mm-hmm. But obviously there are other social networks, and the question is what's your differentiator? And so our differentiator is we have a focus on travel and we have a focus on internationally oriented people. So we want to connect sort of the people that move from one place to another. By the way, that's where the name A Small World comes from. It's sort of, oh, you're here in Saint-Tropez as well. Oh, it's a small world, right? So that's sort of the expression there. And so we really want to connect people that sort of are mobile, globally, and go to the same hotspots and so on. And travel is a focus. And because of that, and because of the ongoing question of how do you monetize a network like this? I mean, we were paid for a social network, but I think longer term, we would also like to experiment with free membership again, where you can only do that if you obviously can pay for your business and pay your cost. And we will not be able to monetize our network in the way Facebook does with ads because we just don't have the volume. So
you also don't want to have that volume, right?
No, we don't, because it's a good point, because we are a curated network, which is in our definition of that and how we use it is we don't let everyone in right away. So we want to make sure we have cool people there. We definitely don't want spammers or anything like that. We want to have a conversation that is clean in the sense that there is no words that sort of offend people, you know, like I'm not going to quote anything like that, but we kick people out that don't live by the rules. So in that sense, we really want to be a bit of a safe space in the internet space. And obviously that comes a bit at the cost of growing quickly because you limit your market a little bit. So then you have to monetize your business in other ways. And our strategy that we're still in the process of executing on is to monetize our member base with travel services as well. And so that's why 2 years ago we started our online hotel booking engine, the Small World Collection. It was just at the beginning of Corona, so it was probably the worst point in time to do something like that. Yep. But you know, there's a lead time to do stuff like that, and you have to get it ready and out. But sure. It's been growing steadily now since then, which is nice. So people know it by now, and so our thinking is this: from a business point of view, we have a really cool audience with our platform. Internationally oriented, travels a lot, have a bit more disposable income. Let's give them things to buy that are connected to what we stand for, which is travel and events and experiences and international, this international orientation. So that it doesn't feel like, oh, why do they want to sell me going back to chairs, right? Which has nothing to do with us. Sure. But it's something that they have an interest in anyways, and they need to book travel somewhere. So like, okay, let's do it with the Small World Collection, which is like an online self-service, something like a Booking.com or an Expedia, just focused on luxury hotels. And the other thing is the Small World Private, which is the traditional travel agency business where you come and tell us, hey, I would like to go to Africa and do safari with my family. My budget is 40,000. Like, can you give me an itinerary? And so we do that. And so in that sense, the business model is directionally set, but we're still building it. And in that sense, I would say, tying the loop or the knot back to what we said earlier, it's still very entrepreneurial in that sense.
That's very interesting because you have the user base, right? So there are sort of membership fees coming in, but now basically with that user base that you've built over the years, you also want to increase the hospitality revenue that you can actually sell on top, basically, on that user base.
Yeah, or to a point also replace itself. Or become a substitute, because what I've seen is, so our membership fee is 100 Swiss francs per year. It's not a lot, right? But the willingness to pay for something like an online club or social media is very low. Right. And I see it with my friends, and I say, oh yes, I didn't pay the membership fee. It's not that I can't pay. I mean, they earn 6-digit salaries, and so it's $100 is not much for them. But it's just a bit like, oh, why should I pay for it? Or also, some people have this sense of entitlement that they should be free in it. Yeah. And so it's a bit of an uphill battle with that. And so we will probably at some point change the model a bit, that we will have a free level and we have a paid for with additional service. So like the classical freemium model. But you can obviously only do that if you have services to sell to your customers. And we didn't have the services when we started. So if we would have done something like that, 5 years ago, we would have bankrupted ourselves. Right. But now we're slowly getting there. And also the latest acquisition of Global Hotel Alliance that we sort of did last year is part of that, because they will add more users to our user base, and then we will automatically become bigger and more interesting to monetize through services.
And how do you plan to do that? Because then I guess the conversion rate, right, of your existing users to paying users in terms of additional services that they book and use, that will be the key point to focus on. What do you plan to have a good ratio there?
To buy the services?
Yeah.
I really don't know is the honest answer. I mean, we can go with the numbers that we have today, and they're still low, but I think it's also an educational thing that you need to teach people what you have. I think it's also when you come in and it's there from the beginning, you're more likely to use it than if you were there and you didn't see that they have that too. So it's hard to sort of model that exactly or have come up with an exact number, but I guess you have to believe that it will work. Right. And I think in its core, it will work. So whether then the number is, I don't know, like 10% or 15% doesn't matter in the end. Or it wouldn't make sense to estimate that.
Sure. Let's also talk about some challenges. You're basically also a platform, you're a social network, because you have users, obviously, but you also have partners like hotels or other things that people can book or that get advertised on your platform. How do you acquire both of them, the users, but also your partners, to have a good ratio and a good offering on the platform?
Yeah, so users we primarily do through invitations from other users. It's still our biggest source.
Great.
It's also our preferred source because it comes free.
But it's the best one, right?
Yeah, it's the best one to have. But which also sort of just tying back to what I said, if you have a paid for model, you also have people dropping out again, right? So that's the unfortunate thing. But so that's why I was saying, if we can keep people even on a lower level with basic service for free, it will continue to grow, right? That's another reason why this model is so interesting. But going back to your question, how do we acquire? We do some Facebook and Instagram advertising, which is obviously a bit a bit funny, like to advertise a social network. And another one, Google is a source, right? But then also we work with partners. I mean, we work with Miles and More. We work with some of the hotel brands where we often then ask them, hey, don't you also want to offer your customers a membership, or do you want to or send an email out? We've also done commission models with partners where we think they have a great audience, and we're happy to pay them for everyone that joins if they send out an email. Cool. So we do stuff like that. So you have to be a bit creative, right? I mean, we kind of didn't do that much during the Corona times because it was just not something that would sell. But we're ramping this up again now. Also the paid advertising. And the hotels, right, was the other question.
Exactly, the partner side.
It's very different, right? So one is the customers, and the hotels are, I mean, they're basically inventory, right, for the collection, for our hotel booking engine. And we work with a few individual hotels, but mainly actually we have a few partners. We are a Virtuoso travel agency, which is the organization of, it's like an invitation-only luxury travel agency sort of club, if you want to call it that. And basically, they have hotels and travel agencies, and all the hotels automatically offer their hotels to the travel agencies. So through that, we don't have to have individual contracts with all these luxury hotels, but we get them in automatically. Yeah. We are, similarly, we're Marriott, Stars, and Luminous preferred travel agency, so we have access to the whole Marriott portfolio. We're also a Hyatt preferred travel agency, so we have access to all the Hyatt hotels, and same for Shangri-La. So that's basically our pool. And since we're only playing in the luxury space, so that gives us the inventory that we want. I mean, we right now have 1,600 hotels. But really sort of the luxury hotels, and we probably need to go to 1,800. But you don't have to be much bigger than that. So we started with 500 2 years ago, and by now we tripled it, which is nice. So now we have the inventory that we want. Yeah,
you again want to be curated, right? To have the right offering for the right audience, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you have to find your position in the market, and if you just copy somebody else entirely, you can probably still do business, but you have to stand for something to advertise it. And our slogan for the hotel part is hotels we love, so only the best hotels, and with extraordinary benefits. So we offer our customers additional benefits when they book with us. So they might get room upgrades, they get a consumption credit for their stay, they get an early check-in, late check-out. It's a bit like what you would get if you have a Amex Centurion, but you just get that without having to pay the Amex fee. And so that's also, we also always have two rates. We have the lowest rate, which is the lowest that you can get, and the Small World sort of VIP rate, and that's the one with the benefits. And 99% of users booked that rate because that's really what is special about the Small World collection.
Nice. Yeah, I wanted to ask about the benefit, right, with all the access, but that makes a lot of sense because you need to have the incentives that they have it cheaper or with more benefits.
Yeah, I mean, it's from a user's point of view, it's basically you get the same hotel, probably at the same price. Yeah. You don't get it cheaper. That's not how we work, but you get more for it. Yeah. And so that's and many customers in this segment that we operate, they don't necessarily, everybody wants a bargain, but they know that the luxury hotels usually don't compromise much on price, but they're happy to get something on top, right? That's how it works.
Then you have a good deal there.
Yeah, and the return rate is actually really high. So we see that users that book with us come back to book with us. So it's nice to see that.
Yeah, and there you really can build your differentiating product in that segment. That makes a lot of sense.
And so what is obviously also then the next question, which is not the user benefit, but for us, why do we have a travel platform? Because we already a travel community. People are travelers. And if we show them great hotels in their newsfeed, we show them, we send newsletters, of course, for the hotels. They kind of trust us already. And they say, well, I mean, yes, it's the same hotel. I can book it with Booking.com. We can book it with Expedia. But I say, well, why don't I book it with a Small World? I get more for it. I like the guys. And so that's why we built it. And it seems to work so far.
Sure. And in the travel segment, just to also show the business case there, then you also get reimbursed with a commission on these bookings. I think that's quite an attractive case as well.
Yeah, so it's a typical travel agency business where you get a cut basically of the cost that the customer pays at the hotel, or the price that the customer pays at the hotel.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, I also want to talk about the operational leaf of Patrick Lyotard-Vogt. You know, he's very well known in Switzerland. He was in the media, also always very closely connected and associated, of course, with the ASMALLWORLD brand. So then he basically decided to also leave his operational role, right? And I wonder, what did that do to the company? Was that a challenge for you to sort of see, hey, this is like our biggest brand ambassador. Now leaving the operational role, was that a challenge for ASMALLWORLD as a company?
Yeah, it's interesting. He's Patrick obviously was a great ambassador, sort of leading the jet set lifestyle that sort of ASMALLWORLD stands for to a certain degree. He was chairman of the company. I mean, he was never in that sense that operational. So to use because you used that word. So he was chairman. He was very closely involved in the decision making of especially the bigger decisions. Look, his role. He's a deal maker personality, not necessarily a builder. He doesn't have the patience necessarily to build a company for a longer period of time. It's not his strength, but he can see an opportunity, swoop in and like take it. Yeah. And I think he felt then when we worked together for a while, and we also had obviously other people in the equation, that it's going well, it's steady. Mm-hmm. He had other projects that he also wanted to focus on, and he said, "Well, why don't I step down from my role as chairman?" And he gave that role to Michael Mantz, who was part of the board before, and who then took over the chairman position, so that Patrick could focus on other things. I mean, obviously he's still a major investor in the company, and as such, we still exchange notes and talk a lot, and obviously he hasn't left entirely. Yeah. Also, obviously during the difficult Corona times when things got a bit tough, he is a major investor. Gave us a bit more capital to like go through that, get through that period. So yes, he's close. He's not chairman anymore, but he's still in the background. And so in that sense, I wouldn't say we lost him, right? And it just his role has changed. Right. But he's very much a supporter still and interested that the company is doing well.
Obviously, yeah, as a shareholder.
Yeah, of course.
Great. Now, I also want to talk about going public, because you did exactly that with ASMALLWORLD. In 2018, you decided to do a direct listing at the Swiss Stock Exchange. So was going public always the goal for ASMALLWORLD?
It wasn't. That's where Patrick actually still had a bit of an influence on the decision, and it wasn't an ego thing. It wasn't because he wanted to sell his shares, like you read a few times, and then some people said. It was really because we needed to grow the company, and we knew that, and so we wanted to acquire another company that would have given us scale in social networking, or would have done something similar. And there were negotiations, and in the end, they basically went with another company which was publicly listed. And the reason was because the other company used some of their shares as a currency to buy that company, because the owners wanted something that they can sell again. They didn't want to be locked into another company. And so with us, it was, okay, well, if we take your shares, and how much is it worth, and when can we ever sell it? And it basically fell flat because it wasn't tradable. And I think Patrick was a bit disappointed after that and said, okay, well, I mean, maybe we just also have to have a tradable share and get on the stock exchange. And that's how his mind works sometimes. And then, I mean, at first it was sort of a joke, and then it was like, oh, let's look into this. What does it actually take to do this? Right. And then we had a project team, and there's actually, well, it's actually doable. I mean, why don't we do this? Because it might also give us access to different capital sources, and we can grow that way. And then, it took steam, and we worked with the stock exchange. And then I think it took 9 months from sort of thinking about it until it actually happened. And so that, we were listed. And the financial press in Switzerland thought the world would end if like a small company like ours gets listed on the Swiss stock exchange. And luckily we're all still here. So that's great.
I love that on two levels. First of all, because it sort of demystifies the IPO process. It's not something that is unreachable or completely unrealistic. You then did that and said, well, this is actually doable. I think this is a very strong message to send to all entrepreneurs out there. And the other thing, it gave you more strategic options to play in acquisition games, etc. I think that's a really big asset.
That's how we used it. I mean, the way I think about an IPO is it shouldn't be a goal in itself. It's sort of a milestone in the life of a company, and you got to think about whether you want to do it. And by the way, I am also, having been through it, and so now living with the fact that we have a public company. I wouldn't say going back, but I'm saying there are other things that I think I didn't fully consider by the time we decided to do it. But what I'm saying is the world doesn't end when you're listed. It's not like you're a runner and you reach the finish line and you're done, right? Yeah. It's just. It's a bit more like taking a hurdle in a race and then you keep running, and it just becomes a different race. And in our case, because people often ask, would you do it again? Was it successful? I mean, we raised 12 million Swiss francs afterwards from investors we wouldn't have had access to beforehand. We acquired 2 companies since, which were both included a share component into the purchase price.
Perfect.
And we would not have been able to do that would we not have been public at that time. So in that sense, from a business point of view, I think we achieved the goals that we wanted to achieve with the listing, and actually happy to stay public. And yes, there's a bit more admin, there's a bit more rules, but you know what, the rules actually keep you on track, and they just promote good management practices, like the regular reporting. We actually report every 6 months, but we now switch to a quarterly reporting cycle with our finance team. So it makes sure you have a solid company and a steady company, and in that sense, I'm actually quite happy that we're listed.
You got to stay on top of your game.
Yeah, and it kind of forces you to do that, because if you don't have to do it, it's one of those things that can easily get a bit neglected, right? When you're doing business, you focus on getting things done, and sort of the formal aspects can get a bit neglected. But if you're forced to do it, you just do it, right? Sure. And that's good. And you know what? It's actually really interesting. I have so many conversations with potential investors, current investors, and it also, you get a lot of inputs, and people then connect you with others. So your network becomes bigger because you're actively investable, which makes you a connection point sort of in the financial community. So it's interesting. I'm glad we're public.
Great. And you actually went public with a direct listing instead of a traditional IPO. Yeah. Can you quickly explain us what is the difference, and why was the direct listing the better option for you?
Yeah. So in an initial public offering, you're offering stock of the company to the public to buy for the first time. So usually it means the owners are selling part of their shares, or you create new shares on top. Often it's a combination. And with a direct listing, nobody sells. Basically, it's the only thing you do is you make sure that the share also then has a ticker, and you can see what the price is, and people can trade in. And the second you usually do, or the direct listing, and by the way, Spotify did it, a few other companies by now as well. I mean, not that we were the pioneers, but a few companies have taken that road. It's just it gives you a share price. It makes it tradable, as we said. If you want a currency with another company to buy them, and also if you want to get access to more investors. And we haven't sold a single share of what we had during the IPO. We created new shares. So, but that was capital, the 12 million that I mentioned.
Exactly.
That was new capital that we have created in addition to what we had. So, but we never actually wanted to sell. And so, this is the difference, and this was the logic and how you would decide whether you want to do one or the other.
Right.
The process is pretty much the same otherwise.
Okay.
If you, it's not easier with the exchange or anything like that. It's pretty much the same process. It's just the difference is you're not offering it. Well, with one critical difference is you don't have to have an investment bank. So that's, actually, it's a big difference.
You save a lot of money there.
Yeah, because we did it basically with a few lawyers and our own team. But if you want to offer shares, you have to have a book runner. You have to sort of get bank involved. It can get expensive very, very quickly. If you want capital at the beginning, that's the way to do it. But we just raised capital a few months later. Not through an IPO process, but through a regular increase. Yep.
And now, after you go public, right, your share price is publicly available. Your shares are publicly tradable, obviously. But therefore, now COVID hit, travel industry was heavily affected. And of course, your share price also gets under pressure. Is that something that then concerns you and puts more pressure on you from an operational standpoint?
It depends. It sort of, if your company is funded, if you have the money for your operations, you're cash flow positive, you're actually fine, right? Then your share price doesn't have an immediate impact, whether it goes up and down in a week or so. It's fine, right? Because you're going to run your business and you're going to be there. If you're not funded and you have to do a capital increase at some point, you have to find investors, and your share price is going down, it can get tricky, right? Because it's usually seen as a sign of the health of the company. Right. And so you get into a difficult situation where nobody wants to give you capital. In worst case, you go bankrupt as a company. We have achieved this point of becoming self-funded actually in March this year, so just a few months ago. The reason why it was this late is we still had an earn-out payment for one of the acquisitions, which actually means we paid part of the purchase price with earnings over the years. And so that was a bit of a burden. And especially during Corona, it was, as I said earlier, it got a bit tight. So we had a few sleepless nights when we were seeing that this is going to go on for a moment. But we reached that point of being self-funded in March. And now, to be honest, whether the share price is 10% up, 10% down doesn't impact us right now. It would be nice if it's higher because, as I said, you get comments from friends about the share price, and you obviously get investors that talk to you about it. Also, I get emails. There's one person that emails me and says we should communicate every single week 3 times to make sure we push the price up. But I believe you have to run your business, and the numbers will speak for themselves. And we have now achieved, since in the year we listed, we had an EBITDA of minus 2.4 million. So we were burning cash. And last year we had an EBITDA of plus 2.5 million. So we basically turned the business around. And now we feel quite okay with where we are. And the share price has become less of an issue for us on a daily basis.
That's the company perspective. How is that for you personally? Because I assume you also are, of course, a shareholder of the company.
Yeah.
And therefore, if the stock price goes down, that also has a significant impact on your personal finances.
Yeah, I'm obviously part of my compensation is tied to the share price, and that's true. I've taken a long-term perspective with the share price, and we talked about Bain early and me going back. So I think by now I know that I want to be here, and I want to build the company further. And then if the share price now next month is like I said 10% up or 10% down, doesn't matter that much for me. I know long term, if we build a business that's generating a cash flow the share price will go up. And so I focus a lot more on the operational aspects of the company and I feel the share price will follow at some point. That doesn't mean we're not actively trying to promote it. I mean, we're attending investor conferences, we're doing investor calls. So we get the story out there to get people interested, and probably we could do more as well now, especially coming out of Corona, where it's interesting again to talk about it. Right. But I feel like that the first and most important task for a manager or a CEO is to get the business up, get the business running, get the business growing and profitable, and the rest will follow, right? The share price. I mean, in our case, it went up. So it went up, it went down quite drastically, actually quite heavy swings. And it shows you how the market can be manipulated in both ways. It is manipulated up, it was manipulated down. Now I think we're somewhere in a reasonable level. Could be a bit better, I feel, but the price is and the market has sometimes its own dynamic, but over time it will reflect what the business is doing, and that's what you have to believe in when you invest in a company.
Yeah. And you focus on what you can influence, the operational excellence, building the business and building a successful business.
Exactly, and like I said, so when we listed, we had a negative EBITDA. And now we're positive, and we have twice the size in terms of revenue. So, I mean, that's what we need to focus on, right? Exactly. And it's actually, the funny thing is, the share price was higher when the business was negative than it is now. So it tells you a little bit about the market. But I think we'll get there.
Great. So, of course, now after going public, to promising acquisitions, post-COVID times, hopefully, what are your plans for the next few months? What do you want to tackle and focus on?
Yeah, we have a few projects that we're working on. So, in essence, the core, the social network, still needs to be better. I mean, we have posting functionality, right? But we don't have video yet. We need to bring it there. We talked about potentially having a level with a free level that we're adding, so just get it more people into it, get more people interested. The hotel booking part can be improved. I mean, so we're working on that. And then there's the latest move that we made is we bought a 10% stake in Global Hotel Alliance. Global Hotel Alliance is the biggest loyalty program of independent hotel brands. So you have Kempinski in there, you have Minor Group, which is Anantara and like NH, you have Nikki Beach, you have Corinthia, you have Pan Pacific. So you have about 40 brands that are in there. And it's basically a competitor to like a Bonvoy program for Marriott that many people will know. So it's called GHA Discovery. And we bought 10% in them, and they bought 3% in ASMALLWORLD. So it's to sort of show that we're working together as a strategic alliance. Right. And we will offer the ASMALLWORLD membership to their best customers as a part of the status benefit. And with that, we will get a lot of more travelers into ASMALLWORLD. Actual
travelers,
Yeah, because you have to earn the status, right? So you have to have stayed at the hotels, otherwise you wouldn't have that level. And so they will get, as part of their status benefits, the perk to be a free ASMALLWORLD member, or get a complimentary membership. And that should give us more users, and hopefully they will use our services and that we offer them. We, on the other hand, also extending our memberships where you get air miles with your memberships. I mean, we have the partnership with Miles & More, the miles program of Lufthansa and Swiss and Austrian Airlines and so on. We're working on a potential partnership with Emirates to have them as well. We have Etihad already, so they will be then the third partner, so that we can next have more of these memberships where you get miles, which has been very popular with travelers to book flights with air miles. And also as part of the GHA discussions, we are now the vehicle for GHA to bring independent hotels into the alliance. So far the alliance only accepted chains, so you had to have a few hotels and not independent hotels. And we are now going after independent hotels, which is actually very it goes very well with our travel agency setup, because we know a lot of these hotels. We actually have personal contacts with many of them. So we're trying to convince them that they should be part of Global Hotel Alliance, and we would then be basically the contact and the manager of them. So that the ASMALLWORLD brand will be next to like the Kempinski and so on in the hotel portfolio. Obviously a soft brand. We're not going to tell them to put a Small World on their hotels, but we're basically the service partner for that. And that's another project that we're working on. But in the core, grow the membership base with great users, beef up the services, and then make sure you have a synergetic sort of like ecosystem that works together and generates sort of shareholder value in the end.
Fantastic. And Jan, to wrap up today's episode, we also have some rapid fire questions for you. So I either give you a different options to choose from or a simple question you have to answer in one sentence. Are you ready?
Go ahead.
Let's go. What's your favorite travel destination?
Saint-Tropez.
How often do you travel for leisure?
About 15 times a year.
Great. Famous tourist spots or hidden gems?
I mean, the obvious ones are like, like an Eiffel Tower or, these really old buildings like all over the world that you need to see, right? Sort of, I mean, these are the obvious ones. And I feel like everybody has to see those monumental buildings. And hidden gems, it's very personal. I don't want to give away my secrets here.
Otherwise, it won't be hidden anymore.
Yeah. Otherwise, there's all these people when I can't enjoy it anymore.
Is it in Switzerland or not?
No, it's abroad.
Okay.
It's abroad.
What's one thing that you wish travelers would stop doing?
Pollution.
Yeah.
It's an issue, and also it keeps. I feel like with Instagram, we've also seen it. If you have an Instagram spot, and that's why I didn't mention my other secret spot before. Yeah. You have one photo, and then the whole world wants to be in that one spot, right. and people just basically, unfortunately, they're still not careful enough with the environment, and they just ruin the place, and that's something that I think travel has to be more mindful of. But it's hard unless you block access. It comes down to how the individuals behave, and the individuals are what they are, right? You have some good ones, but you also have some idiots, unfortunately. That's the way it works.
Yeah. What's one destination that you haven't been to but absolutely want to see personally?
I think Antarctica is one thing that I really want to see. But it's a trip, right? And you have to make the commitment to it and go and see it. And then I hope one day I'll do that.
Cool. That's still on the bucket list.
Yeah, it is.
Jan, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure and a lot of fun talking to you. All the best, lots of success, and we're very excited to see what you're building with A Small World.
Thank you, Sylvan.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.